Howdy, y'all. Things look a little different. That's because I'm recording this on my PC with my webcam instead of using my iPad like I did for the first couple videos because the iPad kept fucking up and it's running out of space and cutting the videos off halfway through, but then I try to free up space, but then I can't find the files. It's just a total mess. So we're going to do it like this instead. Fuck this iPad. I won't run out of space doing it this way. That much is for sure. So let's go. So first up, a book that I thought was on my favorites list that wasn't, so I added it to it. So it is 26 books instead of 25. We've got Motherland, Fatherland, Homelandsexuals by Patricia Lockwood. This is a poetry collection that came out when I was in college working at Barnes & Noble. Patricia Lockwood got famous on Twitter for being funny, but then also went viral with a poem that's in this collection that's called Rape Joke, that manages the impossible Herculean feat of being both an absolutely brutal poem about sexual violence and also being very funny at the same time. Most of the poems in this book balance between being very serious and very funny, and often have very funny titles and concepts like The Whole World Gets Together and Gangbangs a Deer, or An Animorph Enters the Doggy Dog World, The Hunt for a Newborn Gary, The Last of the Late Great Gorilla Suit Actors. If you like poetry, this is a fantastic one. Check it out. It's absolutely worth your time. Up next is a book that people who know me know that I love. It's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Now, this is a very well-loved copy. You can see that the inside page has fallen out, as was designed for it to happen. What is there to say about House of Leaves? House of Leaves is a cult novel in the truest sense, in that there's like a cult that surrounds it. It is known for having shit in it that looks like this. Let that sink in for a second. At its core, it's a story about love. It's a story about two people who are maybe falling out of love but don't want to, and how they come together to rekindle that love. At its core, that's what it's about. What it's practically about is a portal to another world of endless hallways appears within this house, and nightmares ensue. And this is a book that will fuck up your mind and make you think differently. I remember shortly after I read it, there was this incident where I went to a coffee shop. I opened the door to the coffee shop and went inside and got coffee, and I drank it and read my book, and etc. And then I went to leave, and the door stuck. It wouldn't open. But it opened when I came in. The door had gotten larger in the time I was inside the building, and I got like a pit in my gut. Just like, fuck! And it was because of this book. And if you've read this book, you probably understand why. Absolutely crazy book that there is nothing else like, and I'm sure many people have tried to copy it, but I've never seen anything that comes anywhere near close. So if you're into horror, if you're into experimentation, if you're into the deconstruction of the novel, I absolutely cannot recommend House of Leaves enough. Up after that, we've got a book that I've been thinking about a lot lately and probably need to reread. It's 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. Roberto Bolaño was a Chilean poet who in his later years, in his 40s, started writing novels because he wanted to be able to provide for his family, because poetry doesn't make any money. He wrote a great number of novels fairly quickly before he was diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer, and in his final months cranked out this 900-page beast of a novel and finished the first draft just before he passed away. It's kind of considered to be an unfinished book because he didn't, live to see its publishing. He originally wanted it to be 5 separate books to make more money, but the family decided it was meant to be 1 volume. They published it that way, and it was a huge international literary success. When I read this book when it came out. It looked interesting, and it was big, and so it jumped out at the shelf at me. And then I went to buy it, and the guy at the bookstore was like, "Hey, you like David Foster Wallace, don't you?" And I was like, "Why? Because I'm buying this book?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Yes, I do." That bodes well. So it's a book in 5 parts, but in large part all of it revolves around this fictional Mexican city of Santa Teresa, which is sort of a stand-in for Juarez, and it revolves around the murder and disappearance of young women, which is a very, very horrific and real thing and problem in Juarez and in Mexico in general, largely due to the cartels. The first part is about a group of scholars who are all studiers of this eccentric, reclusive, and little-known German author named Benno von Archimboldi, who all descend upon Santa Teresa because there's a rumor that Archimboldi is there. There's a part that's about an American boxing reporter who's in the city to cover a fight. There's the very famous section that's called the part about the crimes, which is just this absolutely unrelenting, brutal documentation of, I think it's like 90 murders of women, taken in a very clinical, post-mortem style that it will break your soul, absolutely. Just absolutely destroy you. And then the part about Archimboldi, which comes at the very end. It's one of the most epic books I've ever read, and it's a book about violence, about the senselessness of violence, but it's also a book about books and about writing and about the love of writing and reading, and I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of both of those themes, of violence and of reading. So it comes in high on my list. Up next, J.R., a book that I just finished a few days ago by William Gaddis. I spoke ad nauseum about it in my Friday Reads video, so if you want to hear about it, check that video out. After that, we've got probably the only stone cold classic that's on my my list. It's Lolita by Vladimir Nabakov. You probably know what this book is about. It's about Humbert, who is a middle-aged man who tells us the story of his whirlwind romance, as he would like us to think of it, with a 13-year-old girl named Lolita, or as he calls her, as he takes her from her family on a wild adventure it's just horrifying. Nabokov is one of the greatest prose stylists of the English language, which is a feat in and of itself because English was not his first language. He is Russian, but this book was written in English. This is not a romantic book by any stretch of the imagination. This is about the abuse of a child. And it is a book whose narrator is one of the vilest characters in literary history. And he wants you to like him deeply. It's hard to read in that way, where it is disturbing and upsetting, often. But it is truly remarkable in its prose, and just singular, and it's a classic for a reason. What can you say? I've got 2 more, and they're the 2 that sort of I think of as being my 2 favorite books, but I haven't read either of them in over 10 years. That might have to change in the near future. So first up, you also notice that there's something in common with both of them. We've got The Instructions by Adam Levin, a book the size, literally, of your head. It's bigger physically than it probably needs to be. It's just over 1,000 pages long. bigger. It's like printed on thick paper or something. It's because it's not as long as what you, I'm sure, know is number one, but it is physically larger than that book. So this book is about 4 days in the life of a 11-year-old boy named Gurion Ben Judah Maccabee, who is a half-black, he's a half-black Jewish child who believes he may be the Messiah. And this is about 4 days in his life that leads up to a revolution, a violent revolution that he leads within school, and a miracle that happens. And it's presented as a gospel, basically, of this event happening. Gurion is has been kicked out of numerous Jewish day schools for his messianic tendencies, as well as his penchant for violence. He is the inventor and proprietor of something called the penny gun, which is used to strike down his foes with pennies, shot with balloons. He is placed. He's 11 years old, but he's in like 8th or 9th grade. I think he's in 8th grade because it's middle school. So he's skipped grades, but then he's placed into this program called the Cage program, which is like a combination of the bad kids and the sort of special needs kids, and the kids all who need extra attention, basically. And he sort of forms this gang, this group of kids together into his disciples, and he falls in love, but not in a normal sort of what you think of when you think of like teen romance way. There's so many amazing characters in this book. You've got Gurion, of course. You've got Benji Nakamuk, who is his right-hand man and best friend, who's obsessed with beating up this kid named Bam Slocum, and he writes graffiti, "Slocum dies Friday," all over the school. When I met Adam Levin, he signed my hardcover copy of this and wrote "Slocum dies Friday" inside of it. I no longer have that book because I loaned it to someone and never got it back. It's that kind of book, though. You loan this to someone and they steal it. It's that good. You've got Boy Star, who is a kid who is sort of becoming a Justin Bieber type, or wants to be a Justin Bieber type, and so he refers to himself as Boy Star and makes everyone else refer to him as Boy Star, and all the girls are in love with him. And one of the major scenes of the novel revolves around him doing a performance in the school gymnasium. The opening scene of this book, I reread it somewhat recently, and it's such a great opening scene. It's the boys of the Cage are in gym class in the pool, and they decide to see what it's like to waterboard each other, to see if they reach a point where they sort of accept death, and see what they feel. And it's a fascinating book. I'm sure you know, in the first half video, did Adam Levin's other book. I love Adam Levin. He is amazing. This book is long, but like when I read it in like 3 days. It's not hard to read at all. You devour it. It's so funny. It's probably the funniest book I've ever read. It's also probably the best book about being a teenager or a young adult that I've ever read. It's also the best book about being a millennial that I've ever read. It's just everything. It's everything that I want from a book all together. It's a coming-of-age story, I guess. Something like that. What an amazing book. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And, of course, finally, you knew it was coming. It's The Brick. IJ, DFW. I read this book when I was 14. in 2004, 2005. Found it at a thrift store. I was really obsessed with big books, so this one jumped out at me. I bought it, and it just completely fucked my life up and changed my life. It changed my reading habits. It changed my interests, changed my brain, just changed the way I understood what books could be. Yeah, and then, I spent the next 4 years of high school buying copies of it and giving them away to all my friends, trying to get them to read it. No one ever would. Then Wallace committed suicide right after I graduated from high school, and then he sort of, with his death, entered canon, and this book became hugely regarded, and to the point where it then became it's become a meme with people who are into literature, that there's lit bros who want to talk to you about Infinite Jest, or it's got this reputation now, for sure, that is unfortunate, because I think that it already had enough going against it being extremely long and having this notorious reputation of being difficult, which I think is unfair. This book is difficult in that it takes effort. It takes dedication to get through. You can't speed through it. It is extraordinarily long. It's 1,079 pages. Is deceptive. It is, floor to. It's a large, physically large pages, and it is tiny text. And not to mention, the footnotes take up 100 pages worth of the length, and they are even tinier text. This is a book, if you don't know, I'm sure most people who know about books know about this book. It's about a tennis academy run by a family, the Incandenza family, that's across the street from the Ennett House Drug and Alcohol Recovery House, which is a halfway house, staffed by a man named Don Gately, and the two sort of main characters of the book are Don Gately at the halfway house, and then Hal Incandenza across the street at the tennis academy. But there's a cast of hundreds of characters that all sort of revolve around these two places, and the sort of through plot is about this movie called Infinite Jest that was created by Hal's father before he committed suicide, that is so entertaining that the people who watch it don't want to do anything except watch it until they die, and they just keep watching it until they starve to death, basically. And it's in a near future where America, Canada, and Mexico have combined into the ONAN, the Organization of North American Nations, and this group of Quebecois assassins, political agitators called the Wheelchair Assassins, want to get a hold of this tape to try and secede Quebec from ONAN. And you've got the assassins' ties to Hal's mother, and you've got the star of the film being Joelle Van Dyne, who's the prettiest girl of all time, and her relationship with Hal's brother, and her relationship with Hal's father, and then you've got Don Gately, and you've got the halfway house, and you've got Don Gately as sort of a bastion of recovery. He's a Demerol addict. And then you've got Hal sort of descending into addiction across the street as he becomes more obsessive and particular and weird about his marijuana smoking. But there's so much going on in this book. You read it almost as a series of stories that all sort of revolve around the same centrifuge. Wallace is, prose-wise, probably the greatest writer of his generation. This book it will floor you on a regular basis, just language-wise. He was obsessed with reading the dictionary when he was a kid, and it shows. It's a book that requires a lot of interaction from the reader. You have to be an active reader to read this book. You can't just passively. This is not a beach read or anything like that. But for all the effort and work that you put into this book, it will pay you back in tenfold. And this is another one that I've been like, I need to reread it. The last time I read this was when I was first going into college in 2010, 2011. And that was my second read, so this would be a third time I would be reading it if I reread it. But I've been thinking that both this and the instructions need to get reread this year. There's a program that started a number of years ago called Infinite Summer, where people read this book together from over the months of June through September. So I've thought about doing something like that. I've also thought about maybe just breaking it into chunks and doing videos on sections of it. Doing a read-along, maybe try and get other people to read it with me. I have successfully gotten one person in my life to read this book, and he listened to it on audio, which I don't blame him for. And it took him like a year or something to get through it. But I know people who have read it, but I didn't get them to read it. But everyone I know who has read this book, it's like their favorite book. It's that good. It's the real deal. It's got its reputation for a reason. The reputation of it being this impenetrable brick, I think, is unfair. But yeah, it's a book that changed my life more than any other book, probably. And I long said it was my favorite book. I've started to sort of find that passé and try not to say I have a favorite book or what my favorite book would be anymore. But like deep down in my heart of hearts, I think Infinite Jest is still probably my favorite book. But it begs rereading. It maybe rereading will change that, or maybe it will reinforce it. I don't know. Anyways, this has been a long journey through these books. Thank you for sticking around with me. I don't know what will be next, but stick around and we'll find out together. Yeah, thanks for watching.